departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten. Everybody say forgotten. Anybody here that's sometimes forgetful? Anyone here that doesn't forget? Because if you're that way, you might be an elephant. Okay. Well, with the exception of Sister Ramona, you used to call her Paul Harvey Jr., didn't you? They had forgotten to take bread. Neither had they in the ship with them more than one loaf. And he charged them, saying, take heed, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. When Jesus knew it, he saith unto them, why reason ye because ye have no bread? Perceive ye not, yet neither understand? Have ye your heart yet hardened? Having eyes, and see not? Having your heart, or having ears, and ye hear not? And do you not remember? Now, there's three things here. How many's got eyes here tonight? You got eyes, but can you see? How many has ears, but can you hear? How many has a mind? Some of you don't. You're not raising your hand. How many has a mind? But can you remember? I want to preach to you about eliminating the distractions. God bless the reading of the word. You may be seated. It's interesting to note that the disciples of Jesus, they had gotten in the boat to go across the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, it's Galilee, that particular body of water is, in our perspective, just something like a big lake. It's about 44 miles long, around 14 miles wide. But they didn't have an outboard motor. And it was going to take a while to get to the other side of that lake. And normally you carry provisions because you don't know what type of weather is going to happen. Since they did not have Doppler radar, they had no forecast to give to them, no satellites, weather satellites, you know. So the only way that you could tell what the weather is going to do is a hit and miss prognostication by looking at the sky and feeling the wind. And sometimes that doesn't work. But they had forgotten a very important thing about ocean traveling. They didn't bring food. Now, Brother Reggie can testify to this, and some of you others that like to fish. If we go out fishing, man, we put the provisions in that boat. We've got all kinds of knickknacks and drinks, and if we're not catching fish, we're feasting. But here these boys, these men, had forgotten a very important thing. And in the boat was one loaf of bread. Now there's 12 of them, and plus Jesus, and the loaves are not but about maybe a pound at the most, and that's unless Jesus multiplied the bread, and that might have been what they were thinking, but no telling how old it was. Now, I've been to Israel, and their fresh bread, you could knock somebody out with it. It's hard stuff. But they had forgotten something distracted them. And when they were reasoning among themselves that they had forgotten the bread, and all at once Jesus began to say something, and he said, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. Now, when they made bread, they had to have leaven, which is yeast. And that's how they made their bread, and that's how it rose. You women know how to make that. And so they immediately forgot or did not comprehend what Jesus was saying. And their assumption was, it's because we didn't bring bread. Now, he's getting on to us. And they were distracted with the fact they didn't bring the bread, and they did not understand or perceive. And so Jesus said, perceive ye not, or don't you understand? Have ye your hearts yet hardened? You've got eyes, but you don't see. You got ears, but you're not hearing. And you can't remember. Now, Jesus had fed the multitude, and they didn't have to worry about not having food as long as they got the supermarket with them. He could produce the food out of nothing. That wasn't the point. But the Lord was trying to reveal to them there is a danger out there coming from the deceit and the filth of the mouths of evil people that can turn your heart around. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod. Out of their mouths is coming evil things and deceptive words, and you've got to be aware of this. But they didn't comprehend the fact that the Lord was trying to give them a warning. There are a lot of things in our lives that sort of cloud our vision. David said in Psalms chapter 13, and I think it's verse 3, he said, Lord, lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Our eyes get heavy, especially when the cares of this life begins to surround us and cave in, and we're just pulled in every direction, and we become weary. And it's like Luke said concerning the slothful servant, that he began to smite his fellow servant and begin to eat and drink with the drunkards, because he said the Lord has delayed his coming. This is one of the most dangerous things for people that have lived for God for many, many years. At the conclusion of their lives, they begin to get slack and begin to get weary, and they let things into their hearts that shouldn't be there. And this will happen at any age. It's not just the elderly. But I've seen it happen with a lot of people that have been in church for many, many years, and then all at once they begin to get vindictive. And it's a very dangerous thing, because they have been distracted by events that in their environment that has begun to surround it, whether it's evil men that are seducers. You know, there's people out there that would try to seduce you. And I'm not talking about sexual seduction. I'm talking about spiritual. They will try to pull you away from the truth. They will try to pull you away from your good behavior with God, your faithfulness with the Lord. And it's a dangerous thing. Years ago, before there was any cell phones, some of you remember that, all they had for communication was the telegraph. And it was a pretty important invention. It was the first means of communication by wire. Up to that point, it was Pony Express, And so this newspaper had an ad in it for a telegraph company that needed a man to apply for the job, and he had to know Morse code. Of course, that was a no-brainer. To be a telegraph operator, you got to know Morse code. And I took that one time trying to learn how to do it. Didn't get very far with it, but I learned a few things. And so here were several men, included one young man, that came to the office to try to apply for the job. And these men were in the office, and here come a young man, the last one to come in, and he sit down. There was music, loud noises being played. In the background, very faint, was a sound of a telegraph. But while the loud noise was filling the room and the chatter from all of the people that was in there, there was a sign at the receptionist's counter that instructed the job applicants to fill out a form and wait until their name was called. While they were all doing this, everybody filled the form out, and they were there just waiting and talking and carrying on. And the young man gets up and goes into the office room. He was in there a few minutes, and then the owner came out and told the rest of them they could go home. The job's been filled. They didn't understand. So we didn't hear anybody's name called. All we saw was this young man just get up and go in there. What had happened, amidst of all of the racket, faintly the telegraph was typing away. If you can hear and understand this message, come on in the office. The job is yours. And he did. He didn't let the chatter, the noise, and everything else distract him. He could hear the message that was going forward. And there's such a spiritual application in that. Many times we come to church and we're distracted. God is trying to speak to our hearts from either from song or from testimony or from the deliverance of the message, and we're thinking about other things. Several years ago, the young people had a skit, and I don't know if it was at a Christmas banquet or whatever, and in that Christmas banquet, the preacher was up preaching, and he just pouring his heart out, and the church family began to come in. Some come in with different implements that they use in their work. One lady come in with clothes that she was going to hang up. Somebody came in with a dishpan full of dirty dishes. Anybody remember this? Sister Davis does. And it described what happens in basically every service. You've got people's mind that are scattered. And the message just goes right over their head. They might understand occasionally a word or two. It's just like what you wives sometimes say. You never listen to me. Here I am, I'm talking and trying to tell you something, and It's just going right over your head. Some have selected hearing. They hear what they want to hear. And that happens in living for God. But we can't be like the disciples that did not tune in to the message. And Jesus said, you've got ears, but you're not hearing me. You got eyes, but you're not seeing me. You're not using your brain to remember. Peter said in the second book of Peter, chapter 3, said, I stir up your pure minds by the way of remembrance, that you may be mindful of the things that is written, that in the last days scoffers will come, saying, where is the promise of his coming? For this they say from the beginning, that the world was in the water and out of the water. And, nothing had happened. All things continue as it were from the beginning. I get up every day and everything's the same. But what they don't understand is that the earth is reserved for fire. There's going to be a judgment. There's going to be a reckoning day. And if you read that chapter, it goes on and tells about the destruction of the world. But Peter is trying to stir up pure minds. Not sinners, but minds that are pure. And our minds has got to be stirred up. We've got to be awakening. Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, You got to open up our eyes. We read that there was an event that took place when Isaiah, in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6 and verse 1, and this was quoted, I read just a few weeks ago in our Sunday morning services, Sunday evening services. And it starts off in the year King Uriah died. Brother Toby, you were talking about this the other night. I saw also the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. And above it stood the seraphims, each one having 6 wings. With twain he covered his face, and with twain he covered his feet, and with twain he did fly. One cried unto another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the doors moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Now, the catch to this is in verse 1. In the year Uriah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon the throne. For several years, Uriah had gave Isaiah a position in his kingdom. And he had been preoccupied for many years taking care of the needs of the king. Nothing is mentioned about any visions during that time. But it took the distraction to be taken out of Isaiah's life before he could actually see the Lord. Now we read about in the 12th chapter of Hebrews, wherefore lay it aside all the weights and the sin that does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. There's weights, there's sins, there's hindrances, and a lot of time the hindrances are not sin. It's something that preoccupies our time. Hello? Something that keeps you from reading the Word. Something that keeps you from praying. Something that keeps you from going to church. Something that keeps you from knocking on doors and witnessing to people. You know, things that interfere with your spiritual life. Oh, we can make it all kinds of excuses. But did you know in living for God there is no retirement upon this earth? You can't take a sabbatical from working for God. You can't quit. You may get to the point that you're not physically able to do physical work, but you can still whisper a prayer. You can still support those that do. I remember Sister Hill, everybody knows how she prayed constantly, 24/7, 365 a day. When you see her, she was always praying. Even when she had dementia and did not know who you were, she was praying. And we think, well, I just don't feel like it. Sister Shortridge came to prayer meeting Monday night. She lives in Tupelo. She probably didn't feel like coming to prayer meeting, but she did. When we make, as we were talking, Brother Lansdale and I, about sacrifices, every sacrifice you make for God will be rewarded. It don't matter how big or how small. We can't allow our personal feelings to distract us from the race, from the goal, from our priorities that we're supposed to have with God. Matter of fact, Deuteronomy tells us that we're to put the Lord our God first. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. And Jesus repeated that to the rich man, the young rich ruler. He came to Jesus and said, what can I do to inherit eternal life? And the Lord told him, love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, with all your might, and love thy neighbor as thyself, and thou shalt have riches in the kingdom of heaven. He was happy because he said, I have done this all of my life. But Jesus said, there's one thing you lack. Now, with some of us, we would be pretty close to heaven if there was only one thing in our life that we had to take care of. Just one little thing. We'd be ready to do that, wouldn't we? And Jesus said that one thing is sell what you got. Give it to the poor. And thou shalt have riches in heaven. You know, the Lord might ask you, you need to give more to the kingdom. You need to pay your tithes. You need to give a big offering for mission, He may do it. I don't know. He would always be rewarded because you can't outgive God. But he said, I can't do that. And he turned around and the Bible said he walked away sorrowfully, for he was very rich. The riches of his life distracted him from heaven. All he had to do is get rid of it, and he would be rich beyond his wildest dreams, walking on streets of gold. You think that he would change his mind? You know, that rich man is still alive. Not up on this earth, but probably in the lake of fire, wishing that, man, I wished I'd have made a different decision. I wished I had changed my mind and sold what I had and give it to the poor, but can't do it now. Distractions, things that keep us from attaining our miracles and our blessings with God. And it's all there. Everywhere we go, something that's trying to pull us away from living for God. In Job chapter 35, verse 4, it said, I will answer thee and thy companions with thee. Look unto the heavens and see. Behold the clouds which are higher than thou. Job was telling his friends, you need to quit looking and trying to find fault with me, but you need to look up to the heavens. You need to look up to the clouds. If we can lift our head up high, then we won't see the things that are in front of us. We will only see Jesus. What was it, Peter? How come he began to sink? Kept his eyes off the Lord. There was something that distracted him from Jesus. The Bible said when he saw the waves and felt the wind, no doubt he saw the flashes of lightning, he began to worry. You know, those waves were probably pretty high. And he took his eyes off the source. And then he began to sink. And a lot of people have sunken in this life because they took their eyes off of Jesus. As our musicians come, Jesus said in Matthew 9:37, unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the labors are few. Pray you therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into the harvest. The harvest is plenteous. Everywhere you look, there's souls out there that need God. There's young people, there's middle age, there's older people all around your neighborhood that are dying and going to hell. Funerals every week, every day. Brother Reggie can tell you about all the funerals he's been working. Brother Jordan can tell you about all the funerals that he's been working. And you read the papers, it's all out there. And you can't talk to them after they're dead. They're not going to hear you. So the only time that we can win people to God is while they're living. Get vigorous, vigilant. For the devil is going to. The Bible said that he's like a roaring lion walking about and seeketh who he may devour. So the Lord has chosen you not to sit on a Pentecostal pew and do nothing, but to be a witness to all the world. You may not go across the ocean, but you got a world all around you. That's right. Witness. Talk to them about the Holy Ghost, about baptism. Let them know about the power of God that could change them. Invite them to church, you know. Be a friend. And if you're a friend that sticketh closer than a brother to the stranger, that's how you win people. Would you mind to stand? In living for God, You've heard the old cliche that the pay is not real big, but the retirement is out of this world. There's going to be thorns and thistles, and there's going to be times that you suffer loss, but the gain is beyond anything that you can comprehend. Don't let anything distract you. Brother Hill used to say, I'm not going to let that lousy devil knock me out of heaven. We can't let anything stop us. Go forward in God. Amen. Would you come and let's pray?
I love him too much to fail him now. Too much to break my vow, for I promised the Lord that I would make it somehow.